It's Barry McGuire here for Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. We meet up every Monday in the Monday main event to talk about real estate generally, but creative real estate in particular. We bring out foreclosure lawyers and tax experts and insurance brokers and mortgage brokers, development people, other folks who have done creative real estate so we can talk about real deals. We bring anybody that we think can help you move your real estate career along. That's what we're looking to do. We are joined usually by focus team leaders. Thought I saw the ghost of Neil Taniguchi pop in and out there, but I'm sure he's going to be around. Andrea Workington will be showing up later. What we want to do is help you with your creative real estate career. Donna and I produce what we call focus workshops. The first live event in 3 long COVID years was May 7th and 8th in Calgary, where we did our world famous, can I say that? World famous rapid cash event, all about agreements for sale and rent to own and joint ventures and wholesaling, all strategies that can make you money now instead of long-term buy and hold, where you might wait for some time before you get a payoff. We are looking to do our next live event, September 24th here in Edmonton. It's going to be an all-day event strictly on agreements for sale. Now, normally at the Rapid Cash event, we spend half a day, maybe a little more than half a day on agreements for sale. And at this event coming up September 24th in Edmonton, it's going to be all day on agreements for sale. And so for the next few weeks on the Monday main event, we're going to be talking about agreements for sale, various aspects. We did kind of an introductory last week, just a little bit on what an agreement for sale is and how some of our focus team leaders have used them, what they, some of their experiences with agreements for sale, good and bad. And that led us into what we're going to talk about today, which is agreements for sale, opportunities and obstacles. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And look who's here. Neil Taniguchi. Hey, Neil, how's it going there, bud?
Good, Barry. How are you, man?
Pretty good. I'm in my cool house. And when I say cool, I mean it's 26, not 29, like it is outside.
Zoinks.
And I'm not complaining, though. My niece just came back from Spain. They spent 3 weeks in plus 40 weather. And she said her mother-in-law doesn't have a fan, doesn't have an air conditioner, and has 45-year-old mattresses that made life. I can't imagine. Anyway, no complaints about the weather. Thanks for showing up, Neil. We're going to talk about agreements for sale, the opportunities and the obstacles, but it's always good to do a recap. I'm sure there's a few folks watching today who tuned in because they wanted to, for the first time, hear about agreements for sale and what those are, and see if they want to stick around and listen to the whole hour that we have scheduled on opportunities and obstacles. So why don't we just have the briefest of reviews? Somebody says to you, Neil, what the heck is an agreement for sale? What do you say?
So that's a great question, and it's a good recap, I guess, from last week. Folks, watch the video from last week if you get a chance. There's some probably a deeper dive into that terminology there. The short version, I guess, is if you're talking to a fellow investor, agreement for sale is a form of owner financing in which the seller, so if you're the seller, Barry, you agree to provide me as the buyer financing, and specifically with agreement for sale, you remain on title and you remain on mortgage, and I take over your payments and I cash you out at a later date. For those of you who are familiar with some of our trainings and previous videos, that latter part of the sentence that I just gave is very, very almost verbatim what you'll hear Andrea say in the course when she does her kitchen table talk, so to speak. And when she explains it to sellers, quite frankly, the word agreement for sale doesn't even come up, because most people go, the what? Like, and they do like the RCA dog and they tilt their head to the side. Yeah, I'm old. I know what an RCA Victor dog is. So owner financing, short version.
All right. So that's what it is. Owner financing, seller financing. It's and folks, if you're listening, if you've gone to apply for a mortgage recently, you've probably had I guess it's not a huge surprise, but when your mortgage broker puts the raw numbers down in front of you and says, if you want to buy that $400,000 house, you do have the 20% down, right? You do have the 80,000 that you need for a conventional mortgage. And, your 5-year rate is, not sure what it is, 4.5, somewhere on there. Saw one for 3.89 3 days ago, where the owners were very happy that we were able to close to keep their 3.89 rate. So if you're looking to buy and you've either run out your string so that you can't qualify for any more mortgages, or maybe you can't qualify and you don't have very much for a down payment, then seller financing should be of huge interest to you if you want to buy some properties. So
I hear it a lot, Barry, in the various real estate chatter that I see in social media, and talking with people, that what are the challenges that a lot of investors, budding investors, fledgling investors, established investors face is cash and credit. And again, one of the major advantages of agreement for sale is you're not using any of your credit to qualify. You're using and leveraging an existing mortgage that someone else is qualified for. And in a lot of cases, you're not putting a lot of cash into a property. Again, we'll probably talk a little bit about that opportunity side of it. Even in a market that, again, Chicken Little says the sky is falling, called the press right now when it comes to the average Canadian real estate price. And I say that with a little disdain, because we were trained a long time ago. There is no such thing as an average house in Canada. There's no such thing as an average house in Edmonton, where you are, quite frankly, because every neighborhood is different. Every province, every town, there's so many ways to slice and dice. So realtors don't really quote those numbers, but it makes for great statistics when they say the average blah, blah, blah. But anyways, certainly what we're seeing, and we talked about that before, is there's definitely a slowdown in volume happening. We haven't seen price erosion in Alberta yet. We're hearing about it in Toronto and Vancouver right now. So some of those opportunities that may come up will be for people if you're dealing with a seller who's just taken possession of a property in the last 30, 60, 90 days, or man, if you're in the Toronto, Vancouver markets and they bought this year, there's going to be very little cash involved if they were what we call a high ratio mortgage or insured, where they only had 5% down. Go back to that $400,000 property that you were mentioning. The buyer puts down 5%, which is 20 grand. They get financed back to like 98 point, where's Sean when I need him, 98.5% of that. So they're really carrying a mortgage for $394,000 or so on that $400,000 property, and now they need to sell. Something changes in their world is what creates opportunities within AFS. And if you literally took the keys to your new house and got a job transfer, it's not always bad news, folks. It could be that someone got a great opportunity and a promotion that requires them to move halfway across the country, and they don't have a relocation program with their employer, or maybe they're even just switching jobs. Now all of a sudden they're stuck. Because take that $394,000 property, if they put it on a 5-year fix, which again, I think the majority of home buyers tend to take these days. I know you have a future session coming up talking about the finance side, so I'll leave that alone. But you think about the majority of people, $394,000, they made 0 payments, 6 payments. They made a year's worth of payments on it. Their $394,000 is now down to about $388,000 in a year. And then they have a payout penalty on top of about 12 grand. And then if they're going to sell it conventionally, they have realtor commissions that come off of that. They are truly what we call underwater at that point in time, let alone whether the market has settled some since then.
Well, that's Neil, just to let you know, Andrea is trying to get on the show here, and Donna's trying to help her get on the show, but somehow we're having, as they say, technical difficulties. There she is. That's what it needed me to say.
Hi.
Technical difficulties. Well done.
Yes.
Well done. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great, thank you. We're just getting into a little discussion on the opportunity side of AFS in today's market, where you have the classic $400,000 home with CMHC financing, where that mortgage is 300 and how much did we say? $94,000.
$394-ish. Yeah.
$394-ish
After the insurance, the
And
mortgage
add on that
insurance premium
insurance
gets tacked
premium.
on. Yes.
Yeah, so and this is a happy occasion where the owner is glad to have got a promotion, and he wants to move off to the new city, but he talks to his friendly realtor Andrea, who says, "Oh, well, okay, well, you want me to list this house? It was 400,000 when you bought it, and I'm happy to tell you that the market in your area hasn't dropped very much, but it's dropped a little bit." Let's talk about that part, Andrea. You're very close to the numbers because you are a realtor, amongst the many things that you do and the many hats that you wear. And you're a central Alberta person. Can you give us just a thumbnail sketch before we get back to our example? Give us a thumbnail sketch of what's going on in Red Deer and environs for how's pricing holding up? What's been going on there?
Well, I'm pleased to say that Red Deer was voted #1 for most affordable place to live in all of Canada,
Wow.
just like last week. So
No.
I anticipate more people will come from across Canada. I've been helping people from Ontario and British Columbia resettle here in Red Deer, and I think that that's going to continue. So our pricing really hasn't gone down, but it hasn't gone up either, because I think the rising interest rates kind of slowed that down a little bit. But
Yeah.
I'd have to say,
Lost you.
Oh,
Double lost you.
how do you keep a turkey in suspense?
How do you?
I'll tell you later. So whatever else she was about to tell us,
can
folks,
you hear
she's
me
gonna.
now?
Oh, there she is.
Yes.
Yes,
Can hear
sorry.
you.
So yeah, I would say this August is certainly starting to pick up, as it normally does, because July is usually pretty slow. But what I have to say, the biggest area that I've seen in potential agreements for sale is actually in multifamily, because people have these really low 1.5, 1.8% rates, and they're CMHC backed mortgages, and sellers are even offering VTBs as well.
Wow.
So if the price differential right now, if you were to get a commercial mortgage, is about 5%. So if you can assume with qualifying at 1.5, that's great. But if you know that you probably won't qualify, an agreement for sale is an excellent strategy
Yes.
to employ.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's in the multifamily area where they get those very low CMHC insured rates, and those were available up until a short time ago, really.
And certainly there's more
Yeah.
familiarity with that strategy in the commercial real estate realm in general.
Yes.
So,
Yes, we
Yeah,
often
for sure.
talk mostly about the residential side, but the commercial and agricultural side of real estate is quite familiar with agreements for sale. So if you're dipping your toe in the water, it does apply in all three areas. And we just don't talk about the multifamily and the commercial or the agricultural side very much, but it is a presence there for sure. Well, let's get back to our example on the residential side of our prospective seller who bought for 400,000, gets his transfer, loves his new place, wants to move. And so, Andrea, on a $400,000 sale, let's use that for round numbers, what would be the standard real estate commission on that? Can you do that kind of math?
Okay, so that's about 18,000 plus GST.
18,000 plus GST. Okay, so here's our seller. He's getting ready to sell. He's had the thrill of, I've got a promotion and a big raise and I got to move. And he's talking to Andrea, and Andrea hasn't said much to him yet because she wants to hear what he has to say. But he wants to sell, and his mortgage is about $394. The price, let's say we're in Red Deer. Where prices haven't even twitched. His property's still worth about $400,000. this will be an easier one to talk about. So if he employs Andrea to sell his home, Andrea's commission, the overall commission will be 18,000 plus GST. Let's say he got a 5-year mortgage and he's 1 year into it, and he's picked a 5-year fixed term. So for folks who don't know this, if you have a fixed term mortgage and you want to pay it out, lots of folks think it's just 3 months interest. That's not true on a fixed rate. It is the larger of two calculations: 3 months interest, or something called the interest rate differential, which is really the bank figuring out how much they're going to lose if they let you pay back the mortgage and then they lend it to somebody else. How much are they going to lose? Now, as interest rates start to go up, the bank isn't going to lose as much because they can pay, you can pay them back, they say 2% mortgage that you have, and they can lend it to somebody else at 4% or 4.5%. I'll tell you, when the rates are going the other way, the payout penalties can be 15 or 16 or 18. I saw one as high as $25,000. Depends on the bank, depends on the interest rate, depends on the policy. But in a situation like this, this seller, this sort of happy seller, is saying to Andrea, okay, so I want to list my house with you. Andrea, what you're going to say to him, listen, well, commission's going to be 18,000. How do you handle what the payout penalty might be?
Well, typically with that, again, like you mentioned, if they're in a fixed term, I actually get them to call their bank, because I said it could be as high as $10,000 or $15,000. But even if you use like 5 or 7, just as an example, when they've got that many years left on the mortgage, people don't know or don't understand how huge the penalty can be.
Yes.
So it's always important to ask those questions.
Well, that's a great idea. I mean, let's just get the exact number from the seller's bank. But if we just want to do some off the cuff numbers, the real estate commission will be 18,000. Let's say that the interest rate penalty is 7,000, so that's $25,000. So Andrea has to break the news to the seller that if the seller's going to list with her, then and it's around 400, maybe he'll sell for 395. He's going to have to write a check for about $25,000. Going to have to write a check for 25 grand to sell his house. He's not getting any money. He's paying to sell.
His original $20,000, his 5% down payment, poof, gone. Oh, not only that, but you're writing it's a $45,000 delta from when they first bought to when they sell going that method.
So when you talk about opportunities, I mean, this is a dual opportunity. I think it's the classic win-win situation that we always talk about. We really emphasize that we want anybody that comes in contact with us or our focus team or our courses to understand that we don't beat people up. We play for win-win. We're looking to do something in every deal that is a win-win. So for our seller, he's happy because he's got a new job and a promotion. He's now shocked that he has to write a check for $25,000 if he wants to sell in a conventional sort of way. But if you, as a potential buyer, analyze this property and you go, you know what, if I buy it for the value of the mortgage and the seller doesn't have to write that check. Let's just say the mortgage is now $394,000, and the seller agrees with me that I can take over his mortgage payments, his taxes, his insurance, and I'll take care of all of the maintenance on the house and utilities. If the seller agrees with me that that's a good idea, and if, folks, it's a big if, just because you're getting a house for no money down, it doesn't mean that you should always buy a house for no money down. You have to know that you can do what you want to do with this house, that you have an exit. Let's just say you're a long-term buy and hold person and you just want to put this property in your portfolio and keep it for a long time. You need to know that you're going to be able to cash flow this property. You gotta have done your analysis to know that your rent will cover what the mortgage payment is and the taxes and the insurance and an allowance for maintenance and allowance for vacancy. So win-win is what we're looking to teach people about. But if you're looking for an opportunity, here's an opportunity for you as a buyer to purchase a property for no money down, and to so it means you really none of your cash, some closing costs, but essentially none of your cash, none of your credit, as Neil said, no cash, no credit. And if you can make this property cash flow, then that's a tremendous opportunity. Tremendous opportunity. So
The proverbial free house.
yes, a free house. A free house that pays for itself is a good free deal. So it's a good free deal. Sometimes they're not. It can be free and cost you a bunch of money and not be a great deal. So you still have to analyze every property just like you would in any circumstance. You got to accomplish your diligence enough to say that you've done your due diligence and you're happy with the buy, and then you can go ahead. So that's certainly a big opportunity in flat markets or negative markets or markets that are moving in that direction. That's where you find these kinds of deals, these low equity or no equity deals where you have to put in very little money to buy. Flat or negative markets is the place where you find them. So in February of this year, or maybe from October through February or March of this year, sellers didn't really want to talk to you about seller financing because they had 10 people lined up to pay more than 400, I'm sure. So as the market turns a little bit flatter, and it's kind of holding up fairly well in Alberta in most places, but as it turns flatter, and if we descend a little further into recession, there's going to be a lot of these kinds of opportunities. I mean, is that the way you see it, Neil? You see more of these opportunities showing up now?
I think so. Again, there's a couple different variables at play. One is that you're seeing landlords who maybe are on variable rate mortgages, and even though rents are up in a lot of places, payments with the way the prime rate has gone up lately, that what cash flowed nicely or barely, maybe now negative cash flow, and you may have landlords who just don't want to put up with that anymore. But I think in general, you're going to see that we launched a flip house, townhouse on Friday, and we've had one showing so far.
Oh.
So 4 months ago, we'd have had 15 showings a day type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how quickly that market changed. We're still confident in it because the quality's there and all that, but certainly we're going to have to watch the market closely. So I think every seller right now is a little bit on pins and needles going, what's going to happen? Are we going to sell? And there's always going to be people who are looking for a solution that the conventional MLS listing does not provide. So I think those are going to go up.
Yeah, they're definitely going to go up. And as you listen to this, folks, we have seen over the years, the 10 plus years. What do you think, Andrea?
I was just going to say the other segment of that I think you're going to see is for ugly houses. Ugly houses that take a lot more renovation. People are seeming to be a little priced too high. I was with a client this last week looking at a few, and it was just like, you're asking $300,000 for something that needs over $100,000 of work. That's only worth $375 when you finish it. So I think there's still a bit of people thinking that houses are worth more than they are, especially on the flip side for the ugly houses.
And I'll add on to that I think in the frenzy portion of the market earlier in the year, if you had said $300,000 listing needing $100,000 worth of ads to make it a $375 house, it would still sell because people are like, I just need somewhere to live. I can do it. And what we're hearing from multiple realtors right now is that the house better be shiny. It also needs to be priced right. And therefore, if it's not shiny, how do you price it right? So you can't even take that $375 house that's in Andrea's example and price it at 275, because typically a lot of folks looking for that house are going to be people looking for some upside to spend that money putting it in, or if they're going to have the inconvenience of renovating that house, there better be a reason for that, or home renovators and flippers type of thing. And Nathan, you're exactly right with your comment. Some sellers are operating as if it were still March. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that takes a while. It takes a while for people to understand that the market has shifted. As markets shift, it takes a while for folks to understand, especially people who bought high and the market says the price is lower now. Some sellers just don't believe that if the property was worth a certain amount at one point in time, that it has to still be worth that amount. It cannot have gone down. Which is another opportunity, because if a seller who bought at 400 has gone to see Andrea, and Andrea says, well, you know what, the market says your house is worth $380,000, and the seller he can't accept that. If he sells now, he's at least going to lose $20,000, to say nothing of the commission and payout penalty. Some sellers cannot accept it. So there's another opportunity, because if you can find a seller where price is his issue and your issue is terms, and you want sweet AFS terms where he's your bank, so that you can buy that property for little or no money down, but the seller will get his price. That's an opportunity, as long as what, Neil?
As long as all of the other factors around it are in place, so that you're not getting a great term and everything else is just wrong, like wrong location, wrong property, reconditioning, bad tenant profile. Like there's a ton of reasons beyond just paying the right price to get the term on it, for sure. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the house has to work. And Nathan's comment is well taken, that if you've got great terms on a house in a terrible area where the tenant profile is nasty, or if you've got great terms on a house that's just a bad house. Some houses are poorly built, they're badly renovated, they might look superficially good. So accomplishing all of your usual diligence on any kind of a deal is ultra important, and don't get into the trap of, I can buy this for almost no money, and you're not paying attention to anything else. But yes, the flat to negative market is going to provide more opportunities in the low equity, no equity end of things, which is what a lot of investors are looking for. So that is an opportunity as well. All right, so those are a couple of opportunities. Let's look at some of the obstacles or roadblocks or downsides of doing an AFS. Andrea, you've done a ton of AFSs in your career. What would you say is the number one obstacle that AFS buyers face, and how do you overcome that number one? Or maybe you have two or three.
Yeah, I think the number one is the market shifting drastically, so that when you get to the end of the agreement for sale period, the house is not worth as much as what you thought it was going to be. That would probably be the number one, because nobody's got a crystal ball. Like, we all think it's going to continue to go up in Alberta, or at least I do. Not drastically, but I think, we're starting to see some green shoots. So, I think that would be the number one thing. The number two is, if you put in a rent-to-own client and they don't qualify, then it's like, well, what do I do now? Well, you do anything that you would normally do, right? So you can sell the house, you can rent it out, you can negotiate a new term. So that's one of the things we did a couple of years ago. Is the market just wasn't all that great. So the seller agreed to sign on for another 2 years with zero compensation. So, that's possible as well.
All right. Neil, what about from your perspective?
I think one of the biggest challenges we've seen in doing some of these deals is if you have the seller who has some credit issues going on, typically it's not just the house that's behind at that point in time. Because again, there's a bit of a psyche that says the house, we see people that, man, they've lost their car, they've maxed out their credit cards, they've maxed out their line of credit in order to make the house payments because they really, really want to hang on to their house. And so sometimes by the time they've called us, they are, it's a bad expression to use, but swirling the drain, they're in trouble. And if we don't do our due diligence a little bit as to where they stand, and we don't have our ducks in a row, and the seller files for bankruptcy, it can create a bit of an issue. And again, in the course in September, I'm pretty sure we'll delve into it at a deeper level than we can tonight. We've come up with some strategies, but we had to learn some of these strategies the hard way when we got notice that a seller had declared a house that they didn't own as an asset. They had sold the house to us. We were the owners, but they had still declared it as an asset. And so now you have a trustee trying to figure out if they can grab some money. So rising star, Jared Como, how are you? So that's probably the next one. I think being aware. Go ahead, Andrea. Sorry.
One other thing that that we've come across over the years is it's important to ask people if they plan on exiting Canada. And so that blank transfer of land is signed ahead of time and held in the lawyer's trust account. So you're not having to try to track people down. I think that's very important.
That's ultra important. So for folks listening, if you're working with a seller who has little or no equity in the property or negative equity, once they sell to you by way of agreement for sale, there's nothing tying them to the property. There's no reason that they would be sticking around to accommodate you and smooth out the running of the agreement for sale. It's different when you do an agreement for sale where a seller has, on our $400,000 deal, and let's say he has $100,000 worth of equity and he's lending you $300,000. That seller will stick around and you can always find him because he wants his $100,000 for sure. But the little or no equity person, as Andrea says, could be leaving the country. And so that's one of the things we teach in the course is how to make sure that you as a buyer can get control of your property, even if the seller is not around. Another obstacle, and similar to what you were talking about, Neil, is if after you purchase your property by way of agreement for sale, a creditor files something against the title, claiming that the homeowner owes them money and they want to collect. So it's similar to the bankruptcy trustee situation where trustees can try and look at what homeowners have done and reverse transactions. If a creditor files something against the title, you need to be pretty darn sure that you have filed your notice of interest against the title for whatever jurisdiction you're in. In Alberta, we file something against the title called a caveat. And that caveat would say, hi, I'm Barry McGuire. I'm claiming an interest in this property because I'm a purchaser by way of an agreement for sale. So that gives the world notice that you do have an interest in the property and any creditor would come after you. Now, it doesn't mean creditors can't fight about it and claim that they continue to have an interest. And we do see those sorts of situations. Have one going on right now, but you're in way, way better position if you have your caveat filed against the title, because in Alberta, first in time is first in right. There's a reason they call them first mortgages and second mortgages and third mortgages. If you're a first mortgage and you're not getting paid, you can foreclose and wipe everybody else off the title. And so the caveat is great protection for you, for the person who's claiming against the property or the bankruptcy trustee. That's always nice to show the trustee that you filed your caveat a year and a half ago. And so this didn't show up last week. Nobody's trying to scam you here. But those can be obstacles that you have to overcome. But if you set up your deals properly, if you make sure you file your caveats or your notices in other provinces, it's much better protection than if you don't do it. There was a question that said, why don't you get a power of attorney? That is something, again, that we do teach in the course, which is that we provide you with copies of various types of powers of attorney, full-blown, irrevocable, you control everything style, or a less comprehensive kind of management style power of attorney. And some people get them and some people don't. Some people are in favor of them, some people aren't. Some real estate investors who've done lots of agreements for sale wouldn't get a power of attorney. Andrea knows Andrea knows that. Andrea has done a ton of agreements for sale, and I don't think she often gets a power of attorney because she's been able to manage it without. So it's not essential, but we do give you that.
Just when sellers are leaving the country, then we get the power of attorney. Yes.
Right. Ultra important to get it when sellers are leaving the country. All right, let's go back to the opportunity side of things. So, one of the things we talk about, and we alluded to it at the beginning of the show today, is that we play for win-win. We're looking to be problem solvers. We find opportunities in other people's problems. So they're kind of a yin and yang. If somebody's getting divorced, if they've got, if they've got the transfer that we've talked about, if they want to get terms that nobody will give them, those are all places where we find agreement for sale opportunities. And we like to do them in a way that is a win-win situation. So, what we mean by that is that if you're marketing to find AFS opportunities and you come across an opportunity where the seller says, yeah, he's interested in talking to you, and you look at it and you go, if the seller would just do X and Y, he probably could come out of this not too bad, and he'd come out of it better than if he did a deal with me. So our teaching is that you try and help sellers. Of course, we're in business and we want to help ourselves, and you don't have to bend over backwards and display every other thing that a seller might do in order to solve their problem. But really, if you can see that they could solve it in a different way, then you mention it. What we found is that you can show sellers opportunities till the cows come home, but if they like you, they may ignore your advice about trying to help themselves in different ways and continue to work with you because that's what they want to do. We're always surprised at how sellers will do what we wouldn't do, but do it with eyes wide open because they want to do it. So you can find opportunities when sellers are in those positions. What else do we have for opportunities, you guys? In today's market, what are we thinking about? I think that the sellers who bought their properties when interest rates were really low are going to be sellers who have an interesting AFS property to sell. I think a lot of those are going to show up because interest rates were really, really low for a really long time. There's lots of deals out there that still have low rates. So that's going to be fertile ground for AFS opportunities. I think that's one of the biggest ones that's going to show up in the next little while, for sure. Any other ones that come to mind for you guys?
I think it's kind of on the same line as what Andrew was talking about before. Just distressed properties may be overstated, but if you have a family, not even a rental, but it could be either a rental or a homeowner, where in the case of a rental, the tenants have done that, $5, $10, and hopefully not $20,000 and $30,000 of damage to the property. There's a lot of times when landlords don't have that kind of staying power fund to restore the property. And then they are truly stuck because now they can't rent it and they're not sure what they want to do. And typically there's also a lot of fatigue at that point because they have those tenants. They've also been a lot of negative energy. You can also see it, though, quite frankly, with folks who bought and decided to be renovators or thought they were renovators. We love that. You can do it. We can help commercial, because you can't always do it. You need to admit I can't do it. I say my back gets really sore doing renovations from writing the check, because I don't know what end of the hammer to use. So you'll see the people who have, we gutted the insert room here, usually bathroom. We ripped the flooring out. We did all this stuff. And we've walked into houses where there's no cabinets in the kitchen. And it's because they thought they could rip them out and put new ones in, and they lost interest. They had to use the money somewhere else. Something came up. They were over budget. They spent more. They lost a job. There's lots of reasons why all of a sudden they hit a wall with regards to their resources and being able to spend money to get a house to a shiny stage type of thing where it can be sold and will attract people. And again, part of the course teachings are not only is it you don't get $400,000 in your jeans when you list a house at $400,000. There's also that hidden carrying cost that typically Andrea will quote us a stat, I'm sure, that says how many days on market we're seeing on average, in her market today. But if I said most people that, you put a house up and in February is like, what? My house is still for sale in 5 days. What's wrong? Now we're back to days on market are coming back higher. And days on market is just till the property's tag sold, so to speak, in that the buyer waives their conditions. So they've got their finance condition in place. They've got their home inspection done. And typically, again, there's another, we'll push all the time selling to have that house close in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards. A lot of times it can be up to 6 weeks. And so you're talking about carrying a house for 60, 90, 120, hopefully not 150 days between when you decide to actually sell it and when the closing happens down the road. So there's a hidden expense there for a lot of folks in terms of money out the door.
Yeah, and if you understand how those numbers work when you're chatting with a seller and having to really give them the facts of life, it's important that you understand how those numbers fit. Because if you can show a seller that it might be 120, maybe 150 days before he can get out, and you start adding up payments and utility costs and insurance and et cetera, you start working that into some of those numbers and add up along with the interest rate, the penalties, the interest penalty payout, and the real estate commission. That can be a substantial chunk of change for sure.
Come to Edmonton in about 40 days, folks, and you will watch Andrea. She's a master at taking that top line number of 400 and breaking it down and breaking it down and breaking it down and saying, oh, by the way, so that when they're actually done, they net somewhere around 365 in their jeans, maybe even 360 on a $400,000, actually not even, well, a $400,000 list price in these days. Because again, are we seeing the percentage of houses that are getting sold over list has declined a whole bunch in our market, not just every other market. So now you're not even getting list price, you're getting that percentage of selling price to list becomes a factor again. So 400, you're probably not getting 400 for it. So 400 might net 360 when the smoke clears these days. Yeah,
people have to hear the true numbers as we work our way through these things.
When Andrew's at the scratch pad, that's when there's a lot of cameras that come out and videotape her doing that, because it's like being able to recite that and present that to a seller so that they can understand it is a mastery term that come and watch it, folks. It's neat to watch.
Yeah, it is. I'll add on to that and say I've seen Andrea do her numbers. We have the flip chart out and she starts writing numbers. And there's just an inexorable downward flow to the what people can get for their property, and it all makes perfect sense. I mean, it's all true. It all makes perfect sense. But there's one thing to understand a situation; it's a whole other thing to explain it and set it up and talk to people in a way where they go, "Well, boy, I don't like that very much, but I hear what you're saying. Okay, where do I sign?" And that's sometimes what people do. So one other opportunity I was thinking about as we chatted about this, especially in the low equity, no equity space, is that for folks who have just had the bad news that they're going to have to write a check to sell their house, they often do not want to ever buy a house again. They're not saying to themselves, well, if I do this, am I ever going to be able to get another mortgage? Which is a valid question and one you have to be prepared to answer. They're not saying that. So one thing that'll be really important for you is to understand that you can talk to this kind of a seller and say, all right, so you have 4 years left on your 5-year term. So that's going to expire in 4 years, but we have no idea what the market's going to be like. And so I really, it's a big part of the agreement that I have to have the ability to renew this mortgage for, I think people should just say for another 5-year term, or for 5-year terms until we can properly exit, because who knows where the market is going. And so sellers will write a contract with you that lets you renew the mortgage for as many 5-year terms as you want. So now you've got free financing for as long as you think you need it. And so that's good. It insulates you from, at the end of a 4-year term, saying, okay, well, I've got to get a new mortgage and I'm not ready and I can't do it. Now, what am I going to do with my house? So there's an opportunity in agreements for sale to get really long-term financing. And many of our students do that. I often see stuff that adds up to nothing less than 10 years and more. Now, do you guys do that when you're negotiating? Andrea, I know you're very interested in getting longer terms and ability to renew.
Yes, typically we go for at least 4 or 5 years with the ability to renew the mortgage. And so it kind of depends on the situation too, because a lot of the properties we buy, we sell on an agreement for sale. And sometimes those people are only 1 or 2 or 3 years. So it kind of depends what exit you're looking to do. So when you have a longer agreement for sale, we tend to rent the property first for a few years and then swap it out to a rent to own when we know we're getting closer to the exit.
Right. Yes. Well, that brings up another, I guess, slice of opportunities, which is, folks, if you're listening, you've probably cottoned on to the notion that an agreement for sale allows you to control a property for little or no money down in many cases. Once you control a property, then you have the opportunity to exit that property in a number of different ways. Control gives you the room to say, I want to add it to my portfolio. I want to just, I want to do some fixing on it, and then I'm going to sell it. So kind of a fix and flip where the seller provides most of your financing. As Andrea said, a classic agreement for sale exit is you get control by way of agreement for sale, and at the appropriate time you exit through a rent to own, which can be a huge cash flow generator, to an appropriate rent to own tenant. So agreement for sale gives you control, which gives you multiple exit opportunities. So that's an important aspect as well. Well, let's go over to obstacles. We don't want to be too Pollyanna about this.
What question first?
Question? Oh, sorry. I'm so busy watching my presenter mates here that I'm not looking at the question. All right. What if the property that isn't selling is getting to you through a realtor? Their first question would be, how am I being compensated if there isn't an actual sale today? Well, Andrea, what do you say about that?
Well, realtors typically get paid up front, otherwise they don't want to do the deal. So you're going to have to put down some sort of down payment that would cover those realtor fees. If there's only one realtor involved, oftentimes they'll cut you a bit of a break on not charging 100% commission. And I have met one realtor who I did before I became a realtor, but I was doing a lot of agreements for sale. She actually charged her clients half up front and half when it closed. And I thought that was very kind of her, because there's no guarantee that it's ever going to close. So
Yeah, that's it, folks. If you're using a realtor, realtors need to be paid like everybody needs to be paid. So not all deals are low equity or no equity deals. There are often deals where the seller has negotiated, and it's fair that the seller should get $30,000 or $40,000 out of the transaction and be your bank. I mean, let's take our classic $400,000 deal. If a conventional mortgage requires you to put up 20% of 400,000, which is 80,000, and you're able to negotiate a $40,000 down payment, that's only 10%. So you're doing twice as well if you could actually qualify for a conventional mortgage. So there's how the realtor gets paid, is in transactions where there is actually some equity, and there are lots of deals like that.
We had an example, Barry. It was going the other way, but it's very similar, where it was a deal. We had a house listed, and folks came, wrote a deal on it through their realtor. It was on MLS, subject to finance and inspection, and they had a hiccup in financing that no one was anticipating. Or quite frankly, it may have been that whole case where Andrea's going to giggle a little bit, but it may have been a newer realtor who didn't ask them if they had had a positioning statement done by a mortgage broker and took them shopping. The short version, though, is that when they were about to collapse the deal, we said, if you don't mind us asking, what is it that's keeping you from qualifying? And once we found out, we said, well, quite frankly, we could still, if you still want to buy the house, we could rent to own it to you, sell it to you via rent to own. And they agreed. We actually preserved the selling price off of MLS, didn't tack anything onto it. And again, because the realtor was new, I guess, our realtor took her under his wing a little bit and said, well, we can't pay it because it hasn't been closed, but you'll get paid when it closes. And she went, okay. So we didn't actually pay anything. And fast forward that, it took them, again, a very typical thing in rent-to-own, folks, is it took the candidates longer to qualify than anyone anticipated, but they are now on the home stretch of qualifying. So I'm more than happy to pay out that commission. I'm really happy that he negotiated the deferral on it, and I'm happy to pay it out when it actually closes. And again, when you think about that for us as a company, that means that that's cash that stayed in our till, even though, quite frankly, again, if they had said, well, we need to get paid for something, we would have certainly worked with them to see what we could put together, and maybe done a some now, some later, or you do what you have to do, right? So anyways, it's anything's possible is what I'll say, and it just depends. And so that was supposed to close in September, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're continually amazed at how flexible the agreement for sale strategy is. It's if you understand how it works, you can start figuring out what the opportunities are within the strategic situation that's been presented to you. Well, let's go to a question here. Nathan says, how can a buyer protect their equity in a property on a long-term AFS? We hope all goes well, but unforeseen things can happen. Well, that's a broad question, Nathan. That's a broad question. Yes, things certainly can happen, and we've experienced some of those things happening. You know, you can only do so much, but what you can do is make sure that the things that are available for you to do are actually done. So you can do things like making sure that your lawyer drafts the agreement for sale document. Don't let the other side draft. You can make sure that you file in Alberta your caveat against the title, claiming your interest, or you can file a power of attorney. Both of those give you a lot of control over the property. You can make sure that you use the proper financing schedule when you write your offer to purchase. So you as a buyer need to write a contract and a financing schedule, and then there's the big AFS document that protects you. All of those bits of documentation are important to do to do properly. You can make sure that the AFS seller does get their own lawyer and gets effectively independent legal advice. And what I mean by that is sometimes sellers just want to sign and go, I don't need a lawyer. Just give me the paper. I'll sign whatever. I don't care. In a situation where you're, gaining a bit of equity or where somebody might be able to shoot at you, it's important to go through all of those steps. Now, that doesn't stop people from taking a run at you. It doesn't stop the bankruptcy trustee or a creditor from saying, we think all that's BS. We think that you cooked this up. We think you guys are in cahoots. And so we're taking this to court because we think we are fill in the blank. But doing all of the things that we teach you to do and then not forgetting the steps is important in how you can protect yourself. Nothing is 100% guaranteed, and people can always take a shot at you, but you can do a lot to protect yourself. So that's my answer to Nathan. Not sure whether that's going to be what Nathan wants to hear, but anyway, that's the answer.
We've talked about it at the course, Barry, too, that there's something that our lawyer came up with that is that something that we discuss on September 24th, or is it something you want me to just drop a little carrot here right now about?
But drop the protective carrot.
We love carrots.
We love carrots.
The hint, Nathan, is shove that property so far underwater that the equity is protected by your document on it. Second mortgage. We get a second mortgage document signed by the seller that says that we hold a mortgage. We do what Barry's talked about. We file our purchaser's caveat. Drop the carrot. Yeah. Second mortgage on title on the $400,000 property with a $380,000 mortgage balance today. We would probably put $100,000 second on that and get them to sign it.
Yeah. So that's a further protective procedure that lots of folks do. Neil does it all the time. I've got one other one just before we sign off, and this is aimed at the obstacle that people sometimes face when it's time to pay the seller. So you've been in your AFS for 4 years, you didn't, or more, but anyway, it's coming to the end. You're not getting another renewal. It's time to pay the seller, and you go off to your bank through your broker, and the bank sometimes says, well, we don't want to finance this because your name is not on the title. After your name is on the title, come back and see us and we'll help you. Banks are kind of sticky about that. You definitely need a good mortgage broker to help you, to shepherd you through the getting your own mortgage to pay out your seller when that time comes. But in my latest agreement for sale document, this is just in the last month or so, I've crafted up a clause that says that the seller will cooperate with the buyer in allowing the buyer to transfer the property to himself if some conditions are met. If the buyer has applied for a mortgage, if the lender says, yes, you can qualify, then we have a clause drafted, which will be in the documentation that's showing up at September 24th, allows the buyer to transfer the property into their name, then go back to the bank and obtain the financing that the bank said, if you can just get it in your name, we'll give you a mortgage. And then that allows them to pay out the seller. It's got various protective bits in it so that if things collapse, the property gets reconveyed to the seller. But it'll work, I think, most times in the low equity, no equity deals. If a seller has a ton of equity, their lawyer will shoot at that clause. They won't like it very much. But in the low equity, no equity deals, it'll be a great way for a buyer to avoid that obstacle of lenders going, you don't own the property, we're not giving you a mortgage. So that's my final obstacle of the evening, but I think I've found a way to overcome it. So that's good. All right, closing remarks. We're at anything to take us out of opportunities and obstacles and lead us into next week where we're going to carry on with our AFS conversations.
I think here I'll jump in that for the viewers who are watching this, it's always what's that old radio station we heard about years ago? WI squared FM. What's in it for me? If you're an investor and you're looking for that next level, and it might even be your first level. I know people who started, they weren't buy and hold, and they bought their first property via agreement for sale because they were in a situation where they didn't have any other alternatives. But to have this tool in your tool belt and to be able to not only understand it, but to be able to present it to a seller, I think that was one of the things that came up in the spring session, was a lot of the calls that got made to sale by owners. Everyone said, oh my gosh, I stumbled like nobody's business out of the chute. And then I got better at it. And so this course, folks, the investment in it can make such a difference in your world for you and your why and your family and all those things as to why we do real estate, that it's really, really, really something to consider.
Thank you, Neil. What about Andrea? Closing comment,
Well,
Andrea?
yes, I think people should come just to see Neil. He's pretty amazing. but honestly, like, doing your first deal pays for the course and then some. So
Yes.
if you really want to master these strategies of buying properties with little or no money, you've come to the right place. Make sure you sign up.
Make sure you sign up. Well, that's it. We think we got a great product. It's a lot of fun doing these. You'll make lifelong friends and have a great network to help each other out. Join our private Facebook group where I don't have to answer questions anymore, because the minute any of our people post a question, all of the other deeply involved students answer it. So
there's actually an
sign
AFS
off.
proposal in there, is there not? One for Southwestern Ontario in that
Right.
student success group right now.
Yeah.
A landlord who's experienced enough to be in that group who's saying, hey, does someone want to do an AFS with me?
There you go. It works all across the country. All right. We're signing off for tonight. We're going to reconvene next Monday and carry on our AFS discussions. Looking forward to September 24th. So, Neil, thank you very much. Andrea, always fun.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to everybody next week. Good
Have a
night,
great week,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.